Well, hello, everybody. This is Clara Skyly. So excited to continue the Beyond Influence series, where I interview amazing entrepreneurs like our guest today, Jody Costello. And she specializes in a topic that I feel is relevant to pretty much everyone, and that is home renovation disasters, right? And how to avoid them, how to find the right contractors, and to have a home that you're proud to live in that is free of stress. So she has built a really wonderful business helping women really take charge and have the home of their dreams. So I'm going to tell you more about Jody. Jody Costello is a home renovation planning contractor fraud expert who founded her website contractorsfromhell.com as a result of a remodeling nightmare she experienced. Her mission is to raise awareness about the risks and realities in renovating and hiring contractors. She created her online course called the Home Remodeling Bootcamp for Women to help female homeowners better manage their projects and avoid remodeling disasters. So welcome, Jody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. And my first question is, why did you become so passionate about home remodeling?
Well, in a nutshell, it was the shock of the lack of consumer protection and education for homeowners who were planning on renovating and hiring contractors, as well as the lack of oversight of contractors by the agencies who license them. And I will give you the 2-minute version of what led up to that point and where I am at today and why I do what I do. I launched my website as a result of a horrible remodeling disaster that I experienced some 20 years ago, where I found myself literally in the fight of my life to seek justice. I was dealing with an incompetent, dishonest contractor whose work was shoddy, which led to numerous construction defects, who failed multiple city inspections, who violated a number of significant contractor state laws, who was simply never available, was always on vacation. And ultimately, when push came to shove and I began to complain and file complaints with the contractors board, he abandoned the project and left us stranded. So that ordeal, and it was an ordeal, was a 3-year-long battle that was filled with a lot of drama, a lot of stress, a lot of frustration, both personally and financially. But the good news is that I ultimately won my case, and I, both civilly and as well as with the Contractor State Licensing Board. And so I say the Contractors Board, you think that they would support consumers, but they were telling me that my case was weak and that they were getting ready to close it. And this is important because that never happened, because I challenged them and I won. And the reason why I won is because I went over the head of the local director here in my city, went straight to the state capitol where all the directors and administrators are, found out who the enforcement chief was, got on the phone with him, pleaded my case. He agreed to open it up. He looked at it, came down to San Diego, and him and I met, and that changed everything. So from there, I went on to work with him for 17 years as a consumer advocate, where we looked at different ways in which homeowners can better protect themselves, and as well as policy changes and legislation, which I was a part of in supporting and testifying before the state Senate. And that entire experience working with him and everything that led up to it really led to my commitment to raise awareness about the realities and risks in renovating, hiring, and working with contractors, because the truth is remodeling disasters can be avoided, which is why I created my home remodeling boot camp to educate, to empower and engage homeowners so that they can better manage and control their projects and their money, as well as the contractor, as opposed to the other way around, where if you choose poorly, you'll end up at the mercy of a not so great contractor. And that is really the short version of a very, very protracted case.
Yeah, well, and, I love that story because you had such a terrible experience, but you transformed it into your way of helping people now, right? Now you've
Exactly.
learned all the mistakes the hard way, and now you're helping others avoid those mistakes.
Exactly.
So that's wonderful. So talking about mistakes then, what would you say is a common mistake homeowners make when they're trying to renovate their home?
And this is, this is 20 years of me doing this, working with consumers as well as with the enforcement chief. And the main thing, and I say this all the time, Cloris, it's that people don't know what they don't know, and that's what gets them into trouble. They have no idea of what their state contractors' laws are. They do not know what steps they need to take. They don't know what questions they need to ask or what kinds of legal documents they need to incorporate as part of their written agreements. And the truth is, homeowners have a lot of anxiety about having to hire a contractor. And what happens is that, unfortunately, a lot of homeowners end up making poor choices as a result of not knowing. And I teach people what it is they need to know to avoid those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah, so I would say that the legal contracts is something that people might just kind of want to avoid because it's a pain. You just want to
Yes,
get it done.
yes,
You're looking for a good quote, and then they just go with it, right?
right.
So yeah, and I never thought about that. I actually had my a fair deal of contractors who didn't do a good job, or one of them quit, as yours did.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't finish the job and left, took the money. So things like that. Um,
Yeah,
okay, so we
yeah.
definitely have to know what the legalities are of this renovation, or review the contract very carefully. What else? What other mistakes do people usually make?
Well, it really, honestly, the big thing that I like to really expand on is the vetting process.
Yeah.
And, we made that mistake. And my husband has a background in construction. So he knew the trades
Hmm.
very well, but he doesn't know the legal part where most homeowners, it's not sexy. Nobody wants to deal with it, but it's the stuff that's going to keep you safe and going to keep your project moving right along. And so the vetting process is more than just, and this is really important, a lot of people think it's just a license check and checking with referrals. That's a misnomer. People, I've heard this from consumers, well, the contractor is licensed by the state and his referrals are great, so I should be able to trust him, right? Nothing could be further from the truth, because just because somebody is licensed does not mean they're going to perform ethically or that they're going to perform quality work that meets industry standards. And that's a misnomer among consumers. So the vetting process goes beyond license checks. And I can tell you that with license checks, and I'll give you a real quick example. When we checked our contractor's state license, it was in good standing. There was no complaints, no nothing. And his referrals were, they were good referrals. We talked to 4 different homeowners. Ultimately, what happens with license checks, and I know this is kind of a bummer for homeowners, is that when you are researching somebody's license online and you go, oh, there's no complaints, there's no history of disciplinary action, you feel like you're safe. But that's not true, because here's why. Just because you're looking at somebody's license and there's no history of complaints does not mean that there isn't an ongoing investigation with the contractor. Because in most states, and I would say that it's probably in the majority of states, is that it takes up to 18 months for any kind of complaint or disciplinary action to be disclosed to the public. And in the meantime, the contractor is free to continue contracting with other unsuspecting homeowners and could potentially harm others, which is what happened to us. His license looked great. His referrals were great. 8 months later, when he was abandoning the project and we hired an attorney, boom, there was all the disciplinary action. Plus, because I had Googled his name, he had an ongoing lawsuit while we hired him. So again, this is why I say you've got to go beyond the license checks and the referrals, and you've got to take it upon yourself to do your due diligence, to deeper into their background.
Very interesting. I know that you have a little like an ebook that you've created with all the mistakes that people can make, right?
Right. 7 mistakes that homeowners make that lead to remodeling disasters. And again, what I just shared with you is one of them. And this kind of ties into another thing. That's another major thing is people will give a large amount of money to start a project. That happens a lot. Now, guess what? Happened to me. And in our state, in the state of California, the down payment to begin a project is $1,000 or 10%, whichever is less. This guy, I handed over $35,000 to him, and it should have been $1,000. And I'm telling you, things started to go south pretty quickly. He wasn't adhering to a schedule. By law, he was already past the 20 days in the state of California. Once you sign a contract, you've got to begin some kind of work. He didn't do that. He had a number of excuses. So that's why you start to lose control of your project at the get-go if you give somebody a large sum of money. You're paying for work that has yet to be performed, and God help you that they come back and do it. I don't like to sound jaded, but because I've done this for 20 years and I do get the walking wounded to my website, the stories I've heard are just worse than mine. I mean, they're absolutely worse than mine. And I would encourage anybody that's listening to go to my website, contractorsfromhell.com, and click on my horror story, because that is, that's a testament to what can go wrong.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, okay. So that is very interesting. Now I'm thinking, let's say that we would do the vetting process well. We have a series of contractors that might be a good fit. Like how far do we go? Do we have to select 5 or 3? What is a good number of people to talk to?
Oh yeah, I always go with anywhere from 3 to 5. For example, right now, I've got 6 projects that are on board to be done over the next 12 months. And I'm going to be personally interviewing 2 contractors this Friday. My husband had already selected them. I checked some of the licensing background stuff, and I have some questions for them. And so I'm going to sit down with them and ask them about a number of things, such as, have they had licenses in any other state? Do they have any other licenses within the state of California that perhaps was a partnership and was closed? My head is thinking, has it been revoked, and did you open up another license? So those are the kinds of things you want to ask. And you also want to ask them, how do you handle problems when they come up? And how do they communicate to you on a regular basis? When you have a contractor like I did, who rarely ever dealt with us, he just kind of shoved his salesperson off on us, who never communicated with, versus my reconstruction contractor, who at the beginning of the week was letting us know what was going on, and if he needed to touch base in the middle of the week, and then at the end of the week we would wrap it up. Now, guess what? I had that written into my agreement because I learned from the first time that we need to stay abreast of what's going on. And he was totally fine with it. In fact, he said, that's how I conduct business. So some of those questions you have to ask, you need to find out what their business practices are, because that's going to tell you a heck of a lot more than what a license check will tell you, or their referrals for that matter.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. And especially the fact that you actually have an interview process for contractors. I think many people just go ahead and hire them. Okay, how much is it? All right, do it. But there's much more. And I love the fact that you write things down so everybody knows, everybody's on the same page, and you can have a successful project.
Right.
Now, Jody, would you say that if somebody is renovating or remodeling a home for sale, like they just want to flip the home,
Right.
are there different considerations? Is there something that they should know before they start doing projects like this, which are huge?
Well, that's funny that you should ask me that, because I just did a presentation to a group of investors yesterday who buy houses and flip them, and they have to hire contractors. And one of the things the group was having a problem with, because there were some new investors, is that, of course, they want to try to get as much as they can out of the home that they're flipping, right? But if you choose poorly, you may end up with problems that are going to cost you. What a lot of these homeowners, again, it's just so interesting. They had no idea. I asked them, do you know what your state contractors laws are? Well, no. Okay. Do you know what your down payment requirements are? No. Uh, Two simple things that if you just did a search for your state licensing agency, you would immediately have that information at your fingertips. Already you're protecting yourself, like, oh gosh, I don't want to give this guy 30,000. I can only give him $1,000. Oh my goodness, he's requiring some more money because of some extra work that he didn't tell me about. Okay, that's another problem. And so those kinds of things that I speak to, and I know it's a little bit general right now, but those are the kinds of things that get people in trouble. And that's called navigating the contracting process. So, again, I'm not in construction. I don't know any of the stuff, but let me tell you something. It is not rocket science. And the best thing that any consumer can do is go find out what are some of the best ways to protect themselves. What are some of the construction legal documents that they should be using to make sure that their money is spent for either subcontractors and suppliers? How do I avoid getting lien? Those kinds of things. What are the documents you need to include in that? These are, and there's probably a couple dozen things that homeowners can do in terms of protecting themselves, because you have to understand, from where I come from and where I came from and what I now do, I see all the mistakes and I know how people can protect themselves. But these aren't the fun things to do. It's better to look at design and blueprints and all kinds of other stuff. But this is the stuff that I just urge people to please, if you just sit down, and it doesn't take a whole lot, you can go for a couple of hours. If you just go on the internet, look at your state licensing board, look at some things, and also understand that state licensing boards across the board cannot tell you a lot of the stuff that I do, because they have to be neutral, because this is the truth, they have to oversee contractors and consumers, and though their mission is to protect consumers, they are bound by the industry, building industry, and they have to adhere to certain principles. So. And again, and this is why a lot of consumers get into trouble, because they don't know that, oh my gosh, I have to know this, I have to know that.
True. Yeah, I think, as you said, it's a matter of taking charge, of educating yourself, of finding a mentor like you to show them the path and to get it done the right way.
Exactly.
So now, Jody, let's say that you hired somebody and you did the vetting process, you signed the agreement. It seemed that it was going to be a successful project, and yet they break their contract. They don't follow the agreement. What is the procedure then? Like, do you just say, okay, I'm gonna find somebody else? Like, how do you decide to make that big decision? Because finding a new contractor is a big thing.
Yeah, and who wants to take over a mess, right? Especially like ours. We were fortunate. But, this is now you're getting into the legal land of attorneys, of which I played in for 3 years, and it's not really fun. But it's a breach of contract. So, for example, I did not have a clause, and I talk about this a lot in my boot camp, of due to shoddy workmanship, we have the right to fire you. And there's there's parameters, a criteria that needs to be met, but it's reasonable. It's reasonable for us, and it's reasonable for the contractor, although he might not think so, because I have to tell you that these contracts are boilerplate type of contracts that are generated. They download them, but the types of clauses are all geared towards protecting the contractor, with very few protective clauses in for the consumer. So you just can't, if you signed a contract and you don't know what you signed, and it says in there, if there's no protective clauses, like the one I just gave you, the right to fire due to such and such, you're going to be sued for a breach of contract. So, which leads me to the written agreements. I just had a talk with a construction law attorney a couple days ago, and he's writing something up for my boot camp. But he said the biggest mistake, and I say this as well, is those written agreements are vague. They lack consumer protection clauses. They are geared towards protecting the contractor. Very often people don't know that they have certain protections in place that they can utilize. and very often different states, you have to have that language included in your written agreements by law, but people don't even know that. And they'll just sign a one-page agreement when it should be 10 because it has absolutely either no language that specifies what needs to happen and what's expected, or that it just simply lacks the clauses that you need to protect yourself. And remember, you have a right to including these protective clauses. And any attorney will tell you, if you, and I tell this to people who had a major project like ours, where there was engineering, there was additions, there was all kinds of laws that we have to abide to in the state of California because of earthquakes. You know, he was not doing a very good job on that. But we should have, because of the number of things that we were doing on our house, the safety wise, we should have had a construction law attorney look at that, right. Look at that written agreement. We did after the fact, right? We did after the fact, and it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so all the things I teach, you know, are incorporated into that. And they, you know, you pay $2,000-$3,000 to an attorney to tell you that stuff. Of course, you had to file a letter and all that good stuff, but nonetheless, that's expensive when you start having to hire attorneys to undo the damage, and then it gets, believe you me, it gets very expensive. But again, I always tell people, if you have a very complex project, it's a good idea, if you're not feeling comfortable, to have an attorney, a construction law attorney, not just a plain old real estate attorney. Not to say they're not good, but you know, the construction laws are very complex. So you want somebody who's well versed in that.
Well, that is good to know. I actually didn't know that there were construction law attorneys. I just knew about real estate attorneys. So
right.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like if you have done your homework and, you know, make sure that you have the contract laid out perfectly and the agreement, it'll be a lot harder for the contractor to breach, to have the breach of contract, right? Because you are protected already.
Exactly, exactly. And, you know, and I will say to that, because I was in court several times with a contractor, you know, attorneys argue their cases, and they're always going to interpret in a way that favors their client. But ultimately, the judge will look at what the contractor's state law says about that. So, you know, we were on the side of much of the state contractor's laws, and some of the others, like the breach of contract, which he was suing us for. We sued him for us, and it didn't hold up in court based on the fact that he abandoned the project and the work was so shoddy. So those kinds of things really helped us. But still, you never want to use an attorney to bail you out, because it's very expensive. So it would behoove you to do all your work up front, make sure you're protected. And by the way, I always tell people, you know, search out your city's construction law attorneys in the event that something really goes horribly wrong, that you know you're right in. So, and then that's important. And I've looked at the contractors' laws, licensing requirements, and when the contractors take their tests, that's one of the things, you know, they tell them is the first thing you need to do is get yourself a construction law attorney, because that industry is fraught with a lot of lawsuits, liens, that kind of thing. It's kind of part of that industry. And if you're dealing with an unethical individual, it's going to be very difficult for you. You'll end up winning if they didn't do their part in covering their steps, but it's very expensive for them. And so again, if they can get attorneys, so can you.
So can you, yeah. And it goes back, I think it all goes back to the empowerment piece, right? Like, it's your project, it's your home, whatever it is, your home, or you're selling it. Nobody cares about the project more than you do. So you definitely have to do your part to make it a success.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Jody, why don't you tell us, I know you have a couple of resources you wanted to share with us today, the guide and also your boot camp.
Yeah. So the guide, it's a great way for people to start. I've actually had a number of downloads this morning, and it's 7 mistakes that people make that lead to remodeling disasters. And I've already covered a couple of them here. We talked about the vetting process and about getting educated on what your contractor's state laws are. And you can read the rest of that. And this is, and I've been doing, again, 20 years. And these are the common things that happen with people. So you want to begin by going, okay, what are the things I want to avoid? And that's what this report will give you. And then I'll touch on my home remodeling boot camp for women. That really is designed, I have a different approach, okay? So my approach is really to educate, empower, and engage homeowners to better manage and control their projects. And all of that focuses on how do I prevent myself from ending up in a remodeling disaster and hiring a bad contractor. So I take the point of view as like, I unpacked everything. Here's where everybody goes wrong. I worked with construction consultants. Of course, I worked with the enforcement chief. I worked with construction law attorneys. And I put this whole thing together. I said, tell me where we all fall. I know where I fell. And we just all looked at that, broke it apart, bundled it together, put it in a course. And it's, and it's not, again, it's not rocket science. It's just that people don't know what they don't know, and that's what gets them into trouble. So I unpack all of that for you, and I tell you why. I share some stories. You have some accountability assignments, and then you go on to the next module. So it's filled with a lot of information that you would normally not even think of looking for or asking. So I've taken all that work out for you, and I just put it straight in front of you, and all you need to do is follow along on the modules and do the assignments, and you'll be fine.
That's awesome. So I know that we can probably find out more about this in contractorsfromhell.com. So we'll have all of the links underneath this video. So definitely check it out.
Yes.
Now, Jody, I know we're running short of time. So before we go, I do have one more question for you. And this is about overcoming challenges. As a business owner, I'm sure you've faced a great deal of challenges. Now we're going through a global challenge, really, and it just basically touches everyone, whether you're remodeling your home or not, whether you have a business or not. So when it comes to overcoming challenges, to keep going in spite of them, what is your go-to strategy?
When I'm presented with a challenge, I look at it, I take it apart. What is it about this challenge that is stopping me or keeping me from advancing forward? Or why is this becoming a problem in my life? And a perfect example of that is when the director for the local board here said, you have a weak case, we're closing it. Oh, no, you're not, because I know I have a good case. And so what did I do? I go, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to Sacramento, our state capital. I'm going to find out who the enforcement chief is. I am going to get some necessary information I need. I'm going to present my case because I knew that I had a case. Of course I did. They ultimately revoked his license, but I never allow a challenge to cause me to back down unless I know. I like to pick and choose my battles because some are worth it and some are not. And here there's also the other part that's like you have to surrender certain things that you can't. You've got to accept for whatever reasons, and you just find a way to, okay, so I'm going to have to work a way around that and find a way in which I can continue to move on despite this challenge, and let's see what I can do with that. And that's happened in so many different instances in my life. I've been presented with a lot of health problems in which were challenging, and I had to come up with ways where, okay, how am I going to function with this particular malady, and how am I going to deal with this diagnosis? So all those kinds of things. And at the bottom of it all, Cloris, is my faith, and it really keeps me centered. Because I think I would probably lose my mind if I didn't have my faith. And so whenever I lose focus, it's like, okay, I need to focus back on what's possible, what's going on. It depends on the circumstance. It's like, life has a lot of good things, and life will also throw a lot of curves. And it's really about an attitude. You really have to have a strong attitude about persistence and overcoming, and that pretty much drives my life. I'm a person who hates injustice, which is why I fought so hard, because there were so many injustices, and why I created my website, again, because I was so shocked at the lack of protection in education. So that is really who I am at the center of it all.
I love that. And that's why you've been able to impact the lives of so many people, Jody. So I really
Thank you.
appreciate your being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Cloris. I appreciate the time.